Wait, you have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV.
Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hello and welcome to TV Guidance Counselor. I am Ken Reed, your TV Guidance Counselor, closing out June 2021, a year that thus far has been better than 2020, although the bar was pretty low. Thank you everyone who wished me a happy birthday over the weekend. I turned 41 somehow, which is astounding to me. Sometimes I just wake up and I go, what? But I think that's for all of us as we approach middle age. It's especially strange given that almost the last 2 years, a year and a half, it's been in lockdown. But that's a conversation for another day. Speaking of conversations, my guest this week is the great Fred Mollin. Fred is just amazing. He's a songwriter, musician, a producer, composer. He, for 16 years, wrote music for television and movies, did 2 of the Friday the 13th movies, Friday the 13th, the series, all of it. He did David Cronenberg's Fast Company, which we talk about here. He worked as an A&R man for Disney's children's records branch, I guess you would call it. Just what an incredible guy. Super nice guy, too, and a big TV fan. And it was great getting to chat to him during his busy schedule. He was traveling on the road and in Memphis, and we got to get on the horn. How old am I? Get on the old horn and have a gum wag. Is that a phrase? Anyway, amazing musician. Just look him up. I'll put links to his website and all this stuff there. You will be astounded at all of the amazing things that he has done over the years. Speaking of music, I have gotten some questions about the music that I use on the show. I always neglect to identify it. The opening song here is called Television Addict, which a lot of people know. It's obvious by the clip, but this particular version is a live version by a band called the Hoodoo Gurus, who are from Australia. They had a great hit single called Want You Back. That was like a big college rock hit in the 80s. But before they were the Hoodoo Gurus, they were a punk band called The Victims. That's where it gets complicated. And this song, Television Addict, was originally a Victim song, but as they became the Hoodoo Gurus, they would still play this song live. So that is the version of it that you hear at the opening. The little sound clip of, if you have the TV guide, don't need a TV guide. If you have a TV guide, don't need a TV, is Barnard Hughes from The Lost Boys. And actually that quote, and one day listening to my, music collection on random and Television Addict coming on, was kind of what, this will sound stupid, but that's kind of what inspired me to do the show, in that I had this idea for the show, but when I heard those two things together, I could kind of hear the intro in my head, and I was like, oh, this could sound like an actual show. So that's why I put that together. The next track, in the early days, I used to swap around the opening track before the episode with various songs about television. TV by the Stooges, TV Casualty by the Misfit, like just a ton of Television Man by the Talking Heads. I mean, there's a ton of great songs. And actually I made a playlist on Spotify, as much as I hate Spotify for not paying people very well. It is a really easy place to make playlists that people can enjoy. There's a playlist of just like some of my favorite songs about television, but then I settled on a song by a friend of mine, Colleen Green, who's amazing, a local punk rock kid who I've known for decades from the scene here. And she's just amazingly talented, but she has a song called TV, which is the song you hear before the interview. And she guested on the show ages ago. And that was the first time I used that bit of that song. And so definitely check her stuff out, buy her stuff. She's, again, as I said, really, really great. And then at the end of the interview, you hear a little portion of the Cramps TV set, which is that cut your head off and put it, and the Cramps are just amazing, one of my favorite bands. And then, aren't you sorry you asked now? Then after my outro, you hear a tiny clip of Television by Bad Religion from their Stranger Than Fiction album. And then there's usually, for people who don't listen to the whole episode, I don't know if people cut off as soon as I start talking at the end, I always put a little sort of Easter egg pull quote out of context after that from that episode, really just to amuse me and to see how long people listen. So that's kind of all the music that people asked. So I love answering your questions, by the way. So feel free to email me at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken@icanread.com, and I'm happy to answer everything I can. If you have guest suggestions, please send them. I will try to get that person. Fred actually is guesting on the show because former guest of the show and friend Karen Richmond put me in touch with him and said Fred would be a great guest, and she was 100% right. That was a really good call. Thank you, Karen, for having him on the show. Also, one more musical note before we get in the episode here. I also made a playlist of all the musicians who've been on the show. So that was just kind of a fun thing to kind of do, where I either picked a song about television or like a TV theme song they covered, or one of my favorite songs of every musician who's appeared on the show. And that's a playlist as well. Maybe I'll post them with this episode, or shoot me an email or a message on social media at TV Guidance or at Kenneth W. Reed if you would like that and you can't find it. So anyway, on to the episode. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Fred Mollin.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Fred Mollin, how are you, sir?
I'm very good, thank you.
So you are live via satellite from Memphis, Tennessee.
I am. I'm in the Peabody Hotel, and it's a funky city, but I'm only 3 hours away. I'm based in Nashville.
Peabody's the one with the ducks, right? Is it that hotel?
Correct. Yeah. Just past the ducks in the pond about 10 minutes ago.
So people that don't know, I think those ducks, they have like their own suite. Like they have
their own penthouse suite. They get marched to a big fanfare every morning. They get marched from the elevator to the pond, and then at 5:00 they get marched, on a red carpet back to the elevator, all the way to the penthouse.
Of course, that makes perfect sense.
It is one of the strangest things ever. But I've been coming here for a long time.
Because you grew up in New York, right?
I grew up in Long Island, in the South Shore of Long Island.
We'll get to you've moved around quite a bit, but you went from
New
York to, I think, Toronto, and then to LA, and then to Nashville. Is that sort of a...
Yeah, summary? I did move to LA. Basically, in a nutshell, at age 17, I moved to Toronto because I had some opportunities musically, and my brother was there already. And then in 1978, I moved to LA for 3 years. Then my wife and I moved back to Toronto, where I was based for a long time. And then in 2001, I moved down to Nashville to go back to making records full time out of Nashville.
Because when you were in Toronto, and we'll get to that in a moment here, we're in 1959, which I'm excited about because we haven't done a lot of 50s ones. But you were in like a improv troupe in the early mid 70s, right?
That's correct. I mean, when I moved to Toronto, which was 72, I was 19, and I had gotten an opportunity to play with a singer-songwriter and make a record with him. That was my first real album that I ever played on. But at the same time, my brother was an actor, and he had formed with two other friends, and fellow actors, Canada's first improvisational comedy group, and I became the fourth member. And
that was before, I think, even Second City had their...
It wasn't before Second City in Chicago.
But the Toronto one, right?
Exactly. But we predated the Toronto guys, by about 2 years. And then, frankly, we were all, in each other's pockets for all that time. We were just great friends.
Yeah, because it seems like a small scene whenever I hear the SCTV people talk, because SCTV is like my favorite everything of all time.
Yeah, me too.
They all seem to meet on that I think it was a Godspell production or something, most of the cast.
That's absolutely true. Well, you really know your stuff. Yeah, I mean, that's where I first met people like Paul Schaffer and Gilda and all those people. If they weren't in Godspell, they were all friends of people who were in Godspell.
Yeah, it's like a weird Rosetta Stone of that whole scene that sort of burst out of that one city, and birthed SNL and SCTV and National Lampoon. Like it's this whole thing that just expanded out, and you were kind of right there at the the formation.
It was really a fun time, and a lot of those folks are still good friends. Yeah,
the talent of that pool is just like outstanding. As far as like everyone's musical, which is crazy.
Well, I mean, a lot of them were. Yeah.
To be funny and musical is something I can't do. I mean, I own a guitar, but I'm not very good with it.
Paul Schaffer is the one I'm still closest with. I speak to him and see him all the time.
And Paul, because you did, was it Paul? No, Howard Shore was the first SNL band
musical director. That's right.
He did a lot of the scores for Cronenberg, and then you did the score for Fast Company, right?
Right, which was an anomaly because it was, David's love of car racing that got him to do this very, very B- movie.
It's not like his others.
No, I mean, and but he has a fondness for it, and I was very honored to write the songs and whatever score was on there. Yeah, that was early on. I did not expect to be spending 16, 17 years nonstop composing for TV and film. Back in 78, I was still producing records. So, that was a little bit of a holiday for me to make that music for that movie. But then about 7 years later, I was doing TV and film score full time.
So that was just like hey, we know you. Do you want to do this kind of thing? And you're like, oh, that sounds like a fun.
The producer of Fast Company was a friend, and he knew me as a song person and a record person. And he wanted a lot of songs in the movie, like a Springsteen type score and song score. And so that's why I got the gig. It wasn't because I was known as a film composer.
It's like a pop soundtrack-ish. It's not as
it was really like, they really wanted a Springsteen type score, or not score, but songs. Yeah.
Because Cronenberg loved his Ducati at that time.
he loved racing, and it was a little bit of a holiday for him, I think.
Had you seen his stuff prior to that? Like, I think he had done.
Sure.
And were you like, really, the car racing movie? You've done Rabbit?
It was, it was just a very creative time in Toronto at that point. So I did the music for that after we had just moved to LA. But, I had known David again from the scene a little bit in Toronto. And we all saw those movies because, they were big news, even though they were so odd and grotesque, but David's really if you meet him, he's just a very sort of, I hate to say the word normal, but he feels like a normal guy. But they would make these films with, the most outrageously gross things like Shivers and all those movies.
It's always weird when I see him pop up in an acting gig here and there, like J.J. Abrams used an alias to play David Cronenberg acting. Very weird.
It's very funny. Very funny.
But he's perfect in all of them. So we picked an issue here that is 1959, June 27th to July 3rd, 1959. So you're probably like 3 or 4 years old, I think.
No, I'm 6 years old.
6 years old.
In 59, which is why I picked it, because I was old enough to remember a lot of what was on TV. Yeah. So I was watching TV a lot.
Was it just you and your brother, or did you have other siblings?
I had a sister who's 11 years older than me. My brother's 7 years older than me. I was the baby. And so probably, pop culture was, I had a better angle on getting it early from them.
Were you going into Manhattan a lot? Obviously not probably at 6, but
at 6 only to visit relatives. But, very soon after, by the time I was, 12 or 13, we would go into Manhattan all the time. Yeah.
Because at this time and up until probably the mid 60s, there was still a lot of TV production going on in Manhattan, like all the game shows and talk shows.
Yeah, I think I missed out on that period. By the time I was, in my teens, it was moving away. But, certainly in the 50s, early 60s, yeah.
Yeah, because right here, and I don't know if you picked it on Saturday, well, I went to Sunday. Let me go to Saturday.
Go to Saturday.
Yeah, I skipped Saturday by accident. But when I looked at Sunday, Ed Sullivan was on, which we could talk about in a moment. But on Saturday, what'd you do at 8 o'clock?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you that at 7:30, there was the Dick Clark Beach Nut Hour.
Yes.
Which really, that's actually, I guess, a half an hour. That's what I would have been watching, because I was a rock and roll kid. At age 6, I was buying records by Buddy Holly and Little Richard and everything. So anything to do with rock and roll on TV, that's what I'd be watching. But 8 o'clock, I'm looking at the TV guide and going, there's not much I probably would have watched. We watched a bit of Perry Mason, my father and I, maybe, but I don't really remember much about that, but I do remember, of course, Wanted Dead or Alive with Steve McQueen. And that was a cool show. He was, obviously a very cool customer in that series. There was a lot a ton of Westerns, and so between detectives and Westerns, that's pretty well everything that was on TV, and I found it all pretty fascinating.
Well, the Western was the biggest genre at this time, weirdly. And it probably seemed pretty exotic, living in Long Island, and all these Westerns probably seem like, total antithesis of what you're used to.
It did. Again, watching stuff, when you're 20 minutes away from Jones Beach and you're looking at things like Wanted Dead or Alive or Have Gun Will Travel, which is also another one I circled at 9:30. Richard Boone was outrageously great in that, but it was a great fantasy. I remember being a 6-year-old and, wanting to have guns and wanting to have holsters and, that was a real, like you said, that was a real fantasy.
Yeah. It's weird. I get that probably, and sadly and cynically, there was probably so many of them because they were super cheap to make and they had 2 ranches they could shoot everything on. But right here, just on this Saturday alone, we have Wanted Dead or Alive, Black Saddle, Cimarron City,
Cimarron City, yeah.
Gunsmoke, like they're all U.S. Marshal, like they're all in this one night.
It's all Westerns, yeah. It was really quite something. I wasn't a Gunsmoke fan as a kid. I think my dad was. We all watched a lot of TV. I was definitely, though, I liked some of the, like Have Gun Will Travel was a really cool show. His whole thing about being such a rebel and, sort of just being a gun for hire was such a great, cool show.
Yeah. Some of them, like I wasn't a big Rifleman guy, but I really like, I like Branded, which was like the weird.
Yeah. I didn't watch Branded that much. I watched, I liked the Rifleman. I thought, because again, I was fascinated by his gun.
Yeah.
The weird thing is, now I really am such an anti-gun person, but as a kid in your fantasy, I loved his quick cocking rifle. I thought that was the coolest weapon.
Just the mechanical stuff as a kid, for some reason, that's like very appealing. Like it fits in with like cars and guitars and those sort of really like, it's like, oh, it's a machine I can use. And I don't know. I can't explain it, but for some reason, it's like a little boy.
Yeah.
That's really appealing. And I don't know why.
I agree. I totally agree.
So that's your Western night. Sunday night, what'd you do?
Sunday night. Let's go to Sunday night. Well, we got to be honest. We're talking about, you've said to me, between 8 and 10, but now, look at these TV guides. And by the way, they just bring back floods of memories. Now, my father and I both loved, and my brother probably loved Maverick. Yeah. And we loved Jack Kelly and we loved James Garner. However, of course, 8 o'clock, everyone watched the Ed Sullivan Show. There was no ifs, ands, or buts, really. Because there was always the possibility you'd see a rock and roller. And then, of course, very soon after the Beatles in '64. But, even by the time I was 6 years old, I was watching Ed Sullivan because they would have a rock and roll artist on. And in between then, they'd have some goofy juggler and, puppeteers and then some showbiz, Broadway singer. And it was fascinating. It was our vaudeville,
Yeah. For sure. And this episode is a prime example. Like it's almost like a joke about this episode of who's in it. It's his guests.
Oh my God. Look at it. Yeah.
Duke Ellington, Frankie Avalon, a ventriloquist, Ricky Lane and his dummy Velvet, Lloyd Price, orchestra, Gene Carrol.
Oh, and by the way, I don't want to correct you, but he was a Borscht Belt Yiddish ventriloquist, and it was Velvo.
Oh, Velvo. Okay. Velvo.
And he had a very thick accent. I'm Velvo. And it was a very big thing on the Yiddish Catskill circuit. So, if you look at this list, however, they had Frankie Avalon, who probably was only 17 years old then.
Oh, yeah. This is pre-Beach Party movies.
Yeah. And, oh, my God, yeah. And Lloyd Price, who was just passed away, actually, recently. And Lloyd Price was a great black R&B artist who broke through rock and roll. So that was a hell of a list of entertainment. That's vaudeville.
And Gene Carroll doing stand-up, a comedian, which was one of the few. Ed Sullivan.
Oh, look,
did.
and the Modern Jazz Quartet.
And a plate spinner.
Oh, no, sorry. No, it's not. It's the Modern Jazz Dancers. Sorry.
Close enough.
But it says here that Lloyd Price sang Personality, which was a huge hit, rock and roll hit. You got personality, loads of personality, a huge hit. So I was watching that show at age 6. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it was like if you didn't watch that, I imagine there was a lot less you could talk to people about for the next day, at least.
Yeah. In kindergarten, but, first grade, but, I also, we go to 9 o'clock. And of course I was a huge 77 Sunset Strip fan. That was the coolest show because of everything about, and again, talk about, I wound up moving to LA, and the Sunset Strip had a lot of allure as a very early age. It was as you say, a great fantasy. And so what a great detective series to have, where basically, you get to see Hollywood and Sunset Strip and all these very, very cool characters.
Yeah. I love those, like Johnny Staccato.
Loved it.
Love that one. Even the Dragnet stuff, like the 60s, like just seeing LA change and they're all location shots at that time is just really fun to kind of take a look at.
77 Sunset Strip, had Cookie and his comb, so he would comb his hair, and that turned out to be a big rock and roll hit of Cookie, lend me your comb.
Which is
a hit.
Hilarious, because that was probably the biggest thing in the world that year, and then
oh my god,
pretty forgotten.
Right, but that was a very hip show, and I remember being 6 and 7 years old and really still being aware enough to love it. I just loved it.
When I've rewatched it, I've always enjoyed it. It's definitely got it's not quite a beatnik show, but it's kind of got that cool.
No, I think Peter Gunn was more of a beatnik show.
That's a good point. There's also a G Theater that night, and I only pointed out because I love Ray Boulger, a Boston's own Ray Boulger. And it's weird because it says immediately, dancer Ray Boulger plays a straight dramatic role. Like, why even mention?
Yeah, there you go. Dancer Ray Boulger.
Wow. And then at 9:30 we get Dick Clark with more rock music.
Yeah, now of course I was watching probably Sunset Strip, but the record years was some special that Dick Clark did, and if you look at it, it's pretty great. Actually, of course, it had Johnny Mathis, and I wound up producing 2 albums for Johnny Mathis. So a lot of my life comes full circle. Do
you remember the first person that you met or worked with that you had watched on TV growing up?
Boy, that's a tough question. I don't remember the first one. No, I don't. I've been sort of, I've been in some sort of show business since I was 17. And my God, it must have been, I remember being on a plane and flying from Toronto to New York to master an album, probably at age, 21. And I remember running into on the plane, Sonny Fox, who was the host of the New York kids shows in the morning. And that was probably my first run with oh my God,
was that
I grew up with you,
Was that like Wonderama? Was that one of the?
Yes. Yeah. That was the show. He had the Sonny Fox show called Just for Fun. And then he had Wonderama. And I watched that religiously every Saturday, in New York. Yeah.
Was Zacherly on when you were?
Yes. Again, you're pushing every possible button. I'm a huge Zacherly fan. I can't believe he only passed away a few years ago.
Oh yeah, he was almost 100 years old. Yeah,
he lived a very long life, and I just adored his whole horror movie thing, and we could talk about that the whole hour.
Oh yeah, Zacherly, who I've brought up on the show before, nationally people know him from, he voiced a character called Elmer in Frank Henneletter's movie Brain Damage.
Mm-hmm,
That's a little special thing, but he was like a rock DJ, and he had a show called Teen Scene, I think, which was like a local New York bandstand show.
Fantastic, fantastic situation. Would make a great movie. Sort of a fictional character like him.
Because he did a lot of he would sometimes be news anchor or something. Like he would do, and then he'd be.
But the great Zacherly, where he would pop in and out of these not cheap, but these old Universal horror movies with his funny little bits and stuff, and hosting these movies late at night. I mean, I could not get enough of him. Yeah, I was a fan.
He's one of the all-time great horror hosts. Like
he is the greatest.
And he did a bunch of records as well.
Well, he had a hit. He had a hit called Dinner with Drac, which was a great, I still have the single in my collection.
Were you into that whole, there was that whole mid to late 60s monster kick where like post Monster Mash, there was just like hundreds of monster songs. It was like
absolutely. I loved them all. Yeah, I was young enough. I loved them.
That stuff's great. So that's Sunday. What'd you do Monday?
So Monday I looked in here, and obviously, again, there's a lot of stuff here. The 8 o'clock stuff, I don't remember Restless Gun. I don't remember Texan. I sort of remember Medic, but I must have been watching Walt Disney because that started at 7:30. So Walt Disney was huge for us as young kids, obviously. And that was probably Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color or something.
A Western they've aired here.
Yeah, Texas, John Slaughter. And then, also I loved Ozzie and Harriet. And, as a kid who loved music and started to play music at a very, very young age, probably age 6 or 7, I was drumming and a rock and roll hound. So watching Ozzie and Harriet, which was on at 7:30 that night, at the end of the Ozzie and Harriet shows, once Ricky started singing, they would end the show with him playing a song. And I was mesmerized by him. Interesting we talk about this because I did meet Rick in 1979 in LA when I had moved there and I was producing records out of the record plant. And my friend Al Cooper was producing an album for Rick. And I got to hang out with him. That was heavy. That was the first time I had ever met an idol of mine from television. Yeah.
And were you totally starstruck, or was it? Because
it took me a while to even talk. Yeah.
Because for me, through this show and through doing comedy and stuff, I've gotten to meet a bunch of people too. And I've sort of, out of survival, I think what I'll end up doing is totally repressing it in the moment. And then when I'm alone later, I'll be like, oh my God, like it just kind of hits me later.
Yeah, no, I mean, Ricky was so much a part of my life. And then to meet him and to hang out with him for a couple of nights at the studio, the stories he told, and also how incredibly handsome he was. I mean, my God, I've never seen anyone who was so Hollywood handsome. And of course, I got to know him a little bit more, a little later. And then I'm great friends with his sons. And of course, a terrible way to die. Heartbreaking deal.
And his sons had the band Nelson, right? The twins?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And I worked with Gunnar. Gunnar sang for me on a number of Disney projects, actually.
Yeah, because I was going to say, when you mentioned Disney, you've worked on a ton of Disney stuff in the last.
Yeah, I did a lot of Walt Disney records, music for young kids generally, and probably over 40 albums, and then I ran Disney's A&R out of Burbank for almost 2 years, 2007, 2008, and so I have a lot of history with Walt Disney's music side of things, not the film side. No.
But I think people forget how influential Walt Disney Company was musically. I mean, every animated movie they do is a musical, but they put out a lot of record, like even in the sort of less known stuff of the 70s, or stuff like the Gnome Mobile, or like the Space. Or they put out, I think they released Kurt Russell's record when he was a teenager.
Probably. Yeah.
When he was doing.
No, they have a great history of that. So.
Were you, once you got into that, were you like, oh man, I want to go look through the archives, or like as a fan, were you like, whoa, anything cool?
No, not really. I was pretty busy with it, so I probably didn't have that much time to fantasize or to look. But I mean, I wasn't really a Disney fan by that time, but I was a kids music producer and writer, and it's a very noble part of making music, to make music for young children. So I loved it.
What drew you to doing that? Because that's tough.
Well, interestingly enough, I was actually in the middle of my run of the TV and film score from 85 to about 2001. And around 1998, when my career was really pretty well still going crazy and full time in my film and TV years, I was really known as the horror guy, because I did all sorts of,
Outer Limits and Friday.
Well, yeah, I mean, I did Friday the 13th, Part 7 and Part 8. I did the Friday the 13th TV series that ran 72 episodes. I did Forever Night, which ran 70 some odd episodes, the Vampire series. I did a lot of stuff, and they pigeonhole you. But I did get a phone call in 1997 from Jay Landers, who was running Disney's A&R then, and an old friend of mine. And he said, I have an idea. Would you want to do an instrumental lullaby album that's very peaceful and passive and sweet, and maybe just instrumental versions of Disney songs, but with a full orchestra and you on piano or guitar? And I was like, that sounds great. And that's how I started working for Disney. And then I wound up actually taking Jay's job when he left. I was so fortunate because it really did. It brought me in full time on many levels for a number of years, doing much more kids music than I did. It was nice because then, I wasn't quite as pigeonholed and typecast.
That's like the antithesis of horror movie stuff. Like if anything's going to break you out of that rut, it's going to be kids.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how they trusted me after a while, because they looked at my resume. They would have said, oh my God, look at them. Look at the horror stuff the guy did.
Were you a big horror fan? Like you watched the Zacherly stuff and that as a kid, but were you a big horror fan when you were?
I really was not a horror fan in later years. I mean, so something really, cinematic like The Exorcist. Yeah, absolutely. But I wasn't the slasher movie guy. No, I mean, the fact that I wound up doing 7 and 8 of Friday the 13th, Part 7 and Part 8, was, the irony wasn't lost on me. I mean, right. I had done a lot of TV horror stuff, but I never really done slashers type stuff. And it was a fascinating journey, actually,
Yeah. Was it Don Buechler directed 7?
Don Buechler, I think his name was. Yeah. John
Buechler.
John Carl Buechler.
Like yeah. He died recently.
I never met him because I was in Toronto and he was in LA.
That's so strange. So you would kind of get basically the finished cut of the movie or rough cut, and then you just lay tracks down. Was it hard to, because I think something like Friday the 13th, or you did the Outer Limits series later, I think as well.
I didn't do a lot of the Outer Limits. I did a few episodes, but yes.
Those are so well established musical themes. So you have to do something new in you, but also that still fits in with something that's already been established. I imagine that's tough.
It really depends on, on the series. I mean, the Outer Limits, when I did them, it was obviously a redo of the 50s and 60s Outer Limits, or 60s Outer Limits. So, there was no musical thing I had to follow. I just scored the episode.
But like Friday the 13th, you got to still build on like Henry Manfredini.
I didn't have to. I just, they just had to use those sound effect type things. But I was free to make my own music on both of those movies.
Because I love the score to the series, which is very synthy, right?
Yes, that was what I was known for, was sort of emulating orchestras with samplers and synths.
And but it's perfect for the atmosphere for that. And actually, Cronenberg directed one of the episodes, Faith Healer, which
boy, you know your stuff, man. Faith Healer. And that was actually one of the more gross episodes. Yeah.
Well, appropriately that Cronenberg directs it.
So, I mean, it's no surprise that he did that one. Yeah.
So would you just kind of watch the cut and then like whatever inspired you? Like, because the atmosphere is, even though you're still using the same instrumentation, they're very different in a lot of because the tones are different on that show.
Every episode had to have its own uniqueness in its score, although it was still steeped in the sounds of my Kurzweil and the synthesizers and samplers that I used. But, my way of writing for TV and film, because I'm not, to the manner born, and I didn't go to school to learn how to read and write music. I would just sit in front of the episode on tape, and, my fingers would hit the keyboard and I would just improvise something. Then I'd roll it back and I'd improvise another thing. And if I liked it, I'd lock it in with the sequencer's recorder. And then I'd overdub to it. And, pretty soon that cue was done. Then I'd go to the next scene. So it was really based on performance and improvisation and my interpretation of what was needed for that scene.
That's fascinating because Carpenter does kind of the same thing as well, from what I've heard when he
he's
does
self-taught,
this.
absolutely.
Yeah. But you get that sort of innovative, interesting stuff and interesting sounds. And then Louise Roby also put out a bunch of records. She was very musical at the time.
Yeah, isn't that funny, Louise? Yeah, she had a band before she had done Friday the 13th.
Yeah, and she had a minor hit, I think, with One Night with a cover.
One Night in Bangkok. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Boy, do you know your stuff, man?
It's useful to no one. It's just fills my brain.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have a ton of useless knowledge as well. So.
Before we move on to Tuesday, I do want to mention there's something that caught my eye here at 10 a.m. And it's such a weird thing. It says blood donor program special. Channel 9 has set up a blood clinic in its studio where citizens of Manchester will be seen donating blood from 10 a.m. to noon. So it's literally just like a camera watching people give blood for 2 hours.
Listen, I'm telling you, I am so delighted that I grew up and through all of this stuff. I mean, when we were kids, there was I don't know if they did this in Boston, but in New York, Christmas night, they would just focus a camera on a Yule log.
Yep. Channel 11, I think, did it. Right?
Yeah. For hours. It was just one camera pointed at the fireplace for hours.
Yeah. It's genius, though.
It was genius. It was, we all watch the Yule log occasionally.
For all those apartments and people who don't have a fireplace, it's just great. And
it was a great idea.
They didn't do it for decades, and then they brought it back recently.
God. That was the height of craziness, really,
It's kind of cool that I've definitely in the holidays thrown a Yule log, on my HD TV, and just it's a perfect atmosphere thing. Funny how we go full circle with that stuff.
That was the that predated, screens, your screensaver.
Yeah. It was just like a television screensaver. What'd you do Tuesday?
So here's what I looked at Tuesday, 8:00 in this thing. Now, at this point, I think Life of Riley was already a repeat.
Yes.
But I was a big Life of Riley fan because I just found William Bendix to be just, delightful and funny. And I just loved him, and then, I'm looking here, again, we go back to the old Westerns. I like the Wyatt Earp show. I loved Hugh O'Brian. He was great. Then at 9:00, you had a primetime Rifleman. And if you look, it says John Carradine was a guest star, and that's pretty great.
This is a great episode. He plays a psychic, like a kind of con man, perfect John Carradine role.
Well, that thrilled me. I saw to see that, and I loved all those shows. Again, Rifleman was really so cool for me because I just liked that gun, which was so stupid. Because now I have a problem with gun violence, but you
weren't alone. That was the appeal to the very first shot in the credits is him cocking that gun and spinning it around.
Yeah, it really is.
Chuck Connors also fascinates me in the weirdest way.
Yeah, I think he was terrific, and in those days there were stars and you could just see. That's why I said when I met Ricky Nelson, I was, whatever, in my mid-20s or something. And literally it was like seeing a Greek god. And I'm sure Chuck Connors, when he walked in a room, people probably held their breath, for a second, because he's, handsome, powerful presence.
Yeah, he was on the Boston Celtics before he was an actor. I think he was 6'6" or something crazy like that, which is really weird
crazy.
for an actor.
That is crazy.
And all these people at this time, especially because the early days of TV, they all kind of lived a life before they were actors on television.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
They brought that sort of there's a thing with Eddie Albert earlier in this issue. And he was a war hero from World War II. And he's got this gravitas that they all brought to their roles. And it's interesting. Life of Riley's a show that I don't even know if it's available anymore. It was a huge comedy, and it's very difficult to see now, as is the Bob Cummings show, which is on at 9:30, which I
another one I adored. Cute show, loved that Bob, and loved him, and so that I circled that.
Ann B. Davis is in this episode, who people know as Alice from
but she was a regular on his show.
And he was a massive star and is kind of not really brought up that much anymore.
No, I was going to say his visibility ended. I don't know why, but he's not. No one would know who he is under 40 years old.
The last thing he did was he did a show called My Living Doll with Julie Newmar, and
Yeah, I
she played
remember.
a robot. But he was definitely too old for the role they cast him in. And it made it, because it's a creepy concept anyway, but it was like extra weird. And they didn't really do much after that. So it was, I wonder if that was kind of the final thing.
I don't know. I know he lived a long life as well, and was a big health nut near the end.
Oh, interesting. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, big vitamin guy. Yeah.
Anything else on Tuesday?
Well, I circled Topper was one of my favorite shows, period, of my life, because of Leo G. Carroll and Robert Sterling and Ann Jeffries, who play the ghosts who haunt him every episode. It was so funny and erudite, and I just love that show. I mean, Topper. I have collections of Topper. I still watch them occasionally. And
that's based on the movie Topper?
Yeah, there were movies in the 30s. Yeah.
Is that your go-to comfort show?
It's one of them. I have so many. I have a lot.
Is there anything that you've really been going back to, like since lockdown or in COVID? Everyone seems to have
oh boy. You know, I do watch a lot of like the cop shows from the 50s are fascinate me. So early Dragnets or Highway Patrol. Watching Highway Patrol is hysterical because Broderick Crawford is so overweight he can't get out of the car, and secondly, he talks so fast that it's mind-boggling how anybody could have ever let him on in this role, because literally he's just talking like he's a typewriter, and there's not a shred of anything except just him blabbing just quickly, and I've never seen anything like it. A lot of these shows fascinate me because they're just so primitive.
In a lot of ways, yeah, but then a lot of them are also a lot more cinematic than we expect them to.
Well, some were, but some like Highway Patrol were really, and Dragnet too. I mean, Jack Webb, you know, he was the master of his domain, you know, but he stunk. I mean, you know, these shows were terrible. They were just, you know, they were like wooden acting masterpieces. You watch them now and you're fascinated by it.
Jack Webb was just like, the episodes that he wrote are crazy because he's just God. He just hates hippies so much.
Oh my God. The 60s episodes of Dragnet are great because he's so anti-hippie. Yeah.
That episode, so I think it's the final episode of that 60s series where that guy Blue Boy ODs on LSD. And, Jack Webb's just like, these kids, this is what they get. And it's just an amazing conflict of this sort of straight as straight can be 50s guy and that
oh my God
culture. It's amazing.
How fantastic, really.
Wednesday, what'd you do?
Wednesday, I circled again Ozzy and Harriet, because you got to see Ricky and you got to see him play a song. And by 59, he was playing hits, and he had a band. I was already just fascinated by the electric guitar and all that kind of stuff. So that was a big one for me. Donna Reed, you know, I was, again, big Donna Reed fan. And, you know, I just, again, know a lot of these, the family shows when I was young, like 6 or 7 or 8, they sort of appealed to me because they were such healthy families. And growing up Jewish and living in Long Island, I mean, we were a loving family, but we were so dysfunctional. And then you compare us to like Father Knows Best or Donna Reed or something. And it's like, wow, that's really the way parents and children are supposed to be. You know?
Even though nobody was.
I was going to say, it was a fantasy, a total fantasy.
Absolutely.
You know? But I think Donna Reed appealed to me. I know the father appealed to me, and Carl Betts played the Dr. Father, and you know, and I had probably a little crush on Shelley Fabre, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So it was, I mean, you know, it's funny. Wednesday night, I'm looking at The Millionaire. Was a great show. That was a, you know, episodic show, but it was all, you know, every episode was a different person got the $1 million. So every episode was different. I love The Millionaire. That's another fantasy show. You've tapped into something really important, which is that, you know, a lot of these shows, certainly as a young kid, the fantasy element was so important. So whether it was a Western, whether it was The Millionaire, someone getting $1 million, or whether it was Topper with two ghosts visiting him, these were fascinating shows to me.
It's amazing to me that there was a tradition of anthology shows at this time that weren't horror shows. So like The Millionaire is an anthology and it's not a horror show. And people always think of, Twilight Zone Outer Limits, but there were comedy anthologies, there were drama anthologies and for a long time. And it is a good way to sort of tap into that fantasy life.
It was amazing. I mean, that's really what was so amazing about watching. I was glued to the tube as a kid. I was a latchkey kid, came home and watched TV until my mom came home. And, every weekend was up at, 6 a.m. watching Modern Farmer. And then I was watching Colonel Bleep and all these like really weird, cartoon shows early in the morning. And then, I was glued to the tube. So 59, you're talking, I was glued to that, that cathode tube.
Oh yeah. Everything's new though. I mean, like we go on Thursday here, at 7:30 Burns and Allen is on.
And but see, now I'm looking at Thursday and I'm going 8:00 Zorro.
Yes.
That was a killer show. And that was a Disney show, but that was a killer show.
Yes. Zorro's basically Batman Western for people.
He was a Batman on a horse and he had that great Z that he would make. And I remember drawing the big Z all the time as a 5-6 year old, so you have to watch Zorro. And then, at 8:30, I could see that I'd watch the Real McCoys, although I watched the Real McCoys later when they were on in the afternoon more. But Yancey Derringer, that was another cool, very similar to me, like The Have Gun Will Travel and Yancey Derringer were really cool Westerns. Like they weren't about being on the plains, they were like being in New Orleans or San Francisco. And so they were really, they just fascinated me. And again, we're just talking again, the fantasy aspect of being this kid in Long Island, watching these wonderfully charismatic heroes. This is a great thing,
Yancey Derringer, this particular episode, I just have to read what this one's about because it's insane. This one says, several prominent New Orleans women have been murdered by a man dressed as a clown. Impatient because the civil, what does it say? Because the civil authorities have failed to stop the killings, a group of citizens take matters into their own hands.
Oh man, there you go.
Like that's insane.
It is insane, and then going through Thursday a little further, Bachelor Father and Leave It to Beaver. I mean, these are, Leave It to Beaver was a critically important show to my life. And my brother and I were about the same age difference as Wally and the Beaver. And my mother would always say to us, why can't you be more like Wally and the Beaver? and so but I love that show. And Bachelor Father was a great show because again, it was a very suave John Forsythe raising this very cute sort of niece, and he was like a total hip guy, So I mean, I loved all of these. I mean, these shows. I started to drool when I looked at this TV guide.
And it's great that we live in a time now where, like, literally, you can probably pull any of these up and watch them, like on your phone if you wanted right now.
Yeah, on YouTube. Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I spent probably from 77 till about whenever, I don't know, 7 years ago, collecting everything on VHS and then DVD. And I have a full storage facility of all of that stuff. And now I can watch it all on YouTube.
Yeah, no, same. I mean, if you look behind me at this crazy office, there's shelves and shelves of stuff.
Yeah.
I can watch in my car if I wanted now.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, so, I mean, it's, it's sort of a shame, a lot of investment there, but,
But you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I was going to say, but there's a lot of enjoyment. Absolutely.
Yeah. Hunting it down was good.
Yeah.
And then Friday night, final night of the week. How are you closing it out?
Closing it out on Friday night. Well, I'm looking, I circled again 77 Sunset Strip because I just adored that show. But then, you did have the options, even in New York as well, of like you had wrestling out of Chicago. I'd watch wrestling. Wrestling those days was just a bunch of nutty lunatic.
It's carnies.
But it wasn't like, it wasn't big money stuff. It was really low. It was low money, sweaty guys doing wrestling, and I found it fascinating. So yeah, I would probably watch 77 Sunset Strip for sure, but wrestling, we have to talk about that. That was really, like that was as low class and funny as you could ever get.
That was the first televised sport.
It was like comparing, if you look at wrestling now, that's like Las Vegas. And if you look at wrestling then, it's like, I don't know. I mean, it would be like
Atlantic City.
No, worse. It'd be like worse. It'd be like
Reno.
Newark.
Oh, Newark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Compared to Las Vegas or something.
Yeah, I mean, the first two televised sports were wrestling and bowling because
exactly.
Easy to shoot.
And also I have to tell you, I was a big baseball fan as a kid. We had the New York Yankees, and then very soon after we had the Mets, and I was a huge baseball fan. So again, if there was any baseball at night, I'd be watching that. So, but then we're looking at 8:30, and I Love Lucy was back on in '59. And how could you not say that was one of the greatest shows in the history of television? I mean, that's, along with Seinfeld, probably one of the top 5 comedy series of all time.
It established sort of the sitcom format, and
it did.
Tropes.
It sure did. I got to work for Harry Ackerman, who was the producer of the show and was very responsible for a lot of the great television. And I got to work with him on a show called The New Gidget in 87 and 88.
Oh, yeah. With Karen Richmond.
And I was going to say, and Karen's the one who got me involved with you for this particular show. And she just texted me and said, I think you're on with Ken. Give him my best.
Oh, thank you.
Karen is saying hello. But, I got to work with Harry Ackerman in one of the last shows he ever did. And he had great stories of I Love Lucy and the 3 cameras and all the fake laughter they had to add. And, and I got to see him use the laugh machine, actually.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. He was a wonderful man. And then at 9:00, Bilko, Sergeant Bilko.
I love
Phil
it.
Silvers. I mean, how can you not love? Again, Phil Silvers was outrageously great, and the Bilko show was. These are classic. Probably the Honeymooners, I Love Lucy, Bilko. I mean, these were the greatest TV comedies of our history, and only a few shows have surpassed that. Maybe Seinfeld and maybe 1 or 2 others.
But Bilko, I mean, I rewatched that now, and it feels very modern and it's very funny. Nat Hiken, who did Car 54 as well, and then he died young, so he only made 1 movie, The Love God.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But he died young, sadly, because all of the stuff he did feels very modern. Like Car 54 is not different from Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm. Neither is Phil Silvers. They're very
well. I mean, listen, you have to be. Yeah. I'm totally there with you, because Car 54 and Phil Silvers' show, the Sergeant Bilko, these were the shows that Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld grew up. And don't forget, Jerry grew up probably 2 towns away from me.
Right.
And we all sort of grew up in that same sort of place. And Larry David grew up, I think, in one of the boroughs, probably Queens or something. But I mean, the bottom line is those shows shaped our humor. And so when someone like a Seinfeld and Larry David got together, they were not taking a page literally, but they were taking the page from those shows.
Oh yeah, it teaches us how to structure things at a minimum.
Well, but there was also a lot of just really funny lunacy.
Yes.
that became anarchistic and funny, even back then. With those shows, with Car 54 and Bilko and a few others. And it was such an enjoyable thing to watch them again. I love those shows.
Yeah, Car 54 is maybe one of my favorite sitcoms of all time.
Yeah, I mean, I adored them.
So I know you got to go, but anything else you've been watching now that you would, or a show from this time that people may have overlooked that you would say, if you're going to watch one thing, watch this?
Oh my! You mean from '59? No,
yeah.
Wow, there's so many. I mean, honestly, that was the one thing that was hard. You said, pick shows primetime 8 to 10. And I'm like, wait a second, there's all these other shows. Like, I mean, literally, I'm just looking here and, Rin Tin Tin and Highway Patrol and Life of Riley and George Burns and Gracie Allen. And, oh my God, I mean, like Honeymooners and all, I could watch all of this every day for the next couple of years. I mean, this is my nostalgia. But you know what? I think the best way to sum it up is that it formed me.
Mm-hmm.
TV, for me to wind up doing music for television and film for 16 years nonstop. there was a lot that I learned from being a television kid back in the 50s and 60s that I was able to completely channel when I started to write music for TV and film. I don't think I would have been anywhere near as instinctual if I hadn't been a TV kid.
You inadvertently trained yourself for your career.
I did. And again, I never expected to do music for TV and film. I did it for a lot of years and I did really well with it. But then I got burnt out and I wanted to go back to making records. So I look at those 16 years and I can't believe I did what I did. But I can tell you that there was an instinctual part of me that was formed absolutely by the TV that I watched growing up. This was pop culture at its best.
Well, thank you so much. It's been great to talk to you.
This was so much fun. And boy, did you give me an amazing amount of a flood of memories, you know, and also I love the fact that you know so much and I'd love to be on a Trivial Pursuit team with you. I think we could kick ass together.
Yeah,
you know?
We'll do it. Once lockdown's over, we're going to travel the U.S.
I'm looking forward to that.
There you go. That was Fred. What a good dude. And just an amazing body of work. So much amazing stuff that he's done over the years. And I hope you guys are easing into summer nicely. It is weird. I'm fully vaccinated. I hope you are too. And it is weird to get out and about because things are not the same. But I don't know. We'll see where we're at in the fall. I'm hoping I may make an LA trip. I still haven't got back on stage yet to do stand-up for people who've been asking me about that. Mostly because I was super spoiled before the pandemic and would just get on good shows. And I'm like, I don't want to go to some open mic with 1,000 people I don't like who all want to get on stage and are only there because they want their time. But I don't know. I have a bunch of new stuff, post-pandemic stuff. So we'll see. I don't know. It's very weird to imagine I haven't been on stage in that long. But I'm not like chomping at the bit or anything, but we shall see. Anyway, I know something that we won't have to wait and see about, and that is a brand new episode of TV Guidance Counselor, which will be on next week. So I hope to see you then for that brand new episode of TV Guidance Counselor.
Boy, you know your stuff, man.